For a long time, I believed I needed $1 million to retire. Not better habits, not clarity, a number. What I eventually learned was this: I didn't retire because I hit a magic number. I retired because I built a few habits that made retirement possible. So let's get into it. Somewhere along the way, $1 million became the goalpost. And if you didn't have it, you weren't ready. But there's something that changed in the way that I looked at everything. Millions of people retire every year without near $1 million. About 4.7% of Americans have $1 million in retirement accounts, but 75 million people are retired. When you look at those numbers, it just stands to reason. How are so many people living retired that don't have $1 million in retirement accounts? It tells you that you don't necessarily need millions of dollars. And that was a wake-up call for me. It meant retirement wasn't just about a number. It was about how people are actually living and defining how I wanted to live. So here's some of the habits that I built long before I retired that mattered more than hitting $1 million. Habit number 1, I learned to live below my ego. One of the most important habits I developed was living below what my income could support. As my income went up, I resisted the urge to upgrade everything that I bought. Not perfectly, but intentionally. I didn't need my lifestyle to prove anything. And what I found was that lifestyle inflation is one of the biggest reasons that people delay retirement. And that habit did more for my retirement than any other raise did. I think I talk about the fact that before we retired, 3 or 4 years before we retired, we sold our house in a more expensive place and bought a house in a less expensive place to reduce our monthly costs. Those types of things, people looked at us and said, why did you do that? And we would tell people that at some point we want to retire, and we don't want to retire with this entire situation over here. But my ego and my wife's egos didn't create a scenario where we felt like we need to keep up with the Joneses. We're like, bump that. Maybe we are the Joneses. Habit number 2, I knew and continue to know my real monthly expenses. Before retiring, I didn't rely on guesses. I knew down to the dollar what actually cost me to live. And most people underestimate their spending, especially lifestyle costs. One of the other ways, and I just want to keep it a buck with you, one of the other ways that I got to that place was before I got divorced originally, I was making really good money, but I would only get $100 or $200 every paycheck from my own personal spending money. But I had a whole bunch of money that I was making. And I realized that I never paid attention to the money because my ex-wife was handling the money. And I realized that I had a whole bunch of expensive shit around my house, and I was wasting money on a bunch of crap that I didn't use. And I realized that once we split up and I started going through stuff to sell, how much unused stuff was sitting in places that I hadn't gone into in years. So from that point on, I started to really pay attention to what my financial situation was in a way that at least I had a level of awareness. And I realized that most households underestimate monthly spending by hundreds of dollars. So knowing my real expenses, it did something really powerful for me. It made retirement feel manageable, not scary. Because then it was, oh, that's what I need in order to live every month. How do I get that? And that clarity, it reduced my anxiety more than saving another dollar ever did. Habit number 3, I chose flexibility over a perfect plan. I didn't retire with a flawless plan. And there's times that we just bought a new car and we had to buy a car because our old car wasn't built for what we use it for now. But I also know that I retired knowing that we can adjust, and we can adjust over time because at the end of the day, we built buffer into the plan. Markets change, spending changes slightly, life changes, things happen, whether it's illnesses, whether it's repairs, whether inflation, there's always going to be changes. You could put in a budget inflation of 3% or 5% or whatever percent you want to put in for inflation. But you might have years where inflation goes up 8%. Then what are you going to do then? You've got to have that flexibility. And most retirees at some level rely on multiple income sources, not just savings. As an example, most retirees that are over 65 will use things like Social Security, or they have some annuities, plus they have their 401ks, plus they have whatever it is. They might have a rental property, whatever the financial situation is. But just having a couple different places that money come from. A lot of ex-military have military pensions. It doesn't have to be a large amount, but it's just enough to add a little bit more of that security. For me, what matters the most is not predicting everything, but just trusting my ability to adapt. People ask me sometimes, Sabado, why do you always seem so confident? Do you know a lot? And I say, I don't think I know more than the average person, but I do have confidence in my ability to overcome situations because I've been through a lot of shit and I've come out on the other side. So that's where I think when you look at building confidence around this stuff, even if you're just in the beginning stages, think about your ability to overcome obstacles, not necessarily knowing the answer to every obstacle, because you're not going to know every answer to every obstacle. And that really gave me more confidence than any spreadsheet ever really could. Habit number 4, I learned to recognize that there's an enough number for me. And this one took time because, again, I was caught up like the rest of us. I need $1 million, $1 million, $1 million. And I learned to recognize the enough. And I realized that I could always make more money. And I'd always gone through my career seeking out ways to make more money. But more money didn't always make my life better. It made things complicated in some cases. The idea is that after my basic security needs are met, more income, it really has a diminishing return on my happiness. A lot of people look at people in companies that are in higher positions, but don't realize how much they have to work, how much time they are around their family, or how much less time they're around their family. So as I started growing my career, for example, I went from living in a town and working 5 miles away to having to travel 40 weeks a year just in order to continue to grow my career. So every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I was gone for a long time. And so that has other impacts, some good, some bad. I had to separate at some point what I actually needed from what I was told that I should want. You should have this, you should have that. No, here's what I need and here's what I feel good about. So now I live a life where I feel good about what I have. And that shift freed me more than hitting any number could. Habit number 5, I practice life without work at the center of it. Before I retired, I didn't want to wait to figure it all out. I practiced slower mornings, finding interests outside of work, building relationships that weren't built around work. And that led me to understand that the lack of purpose is really one of the potential struggles that a lot of people have, because you go from people needing you, people asking you questions, to not having it. So this really helps build that transition or bridge that gap into that place. So I started doing that before I retired. I didn't wait. It's like, when you're at work, they say if you want the next job, then you have to work and show that you're the next logical person for that next job. It's the same thing with life. It's no different. So I learned how to structure my days without work being an anchor. And that habit really helped with my transition, make that transition a lot more meaningful for me. So just to bring it all full circle, I didn't retire because I reached $1 million. I retired because my habits, lifestyles, and expectations were all aligned. Money matters, but the habits decide how much money is actually enough. And that's the key. So if you're chasing a number and feeling stuck, maybe the real question isn't, do I have enough money? Maybe it's, do my habits support the life that I want? Think about that. Leave it in the comments. Let me know what you think about that. And if this resonated, also let me know that in the comments. And if you're interested in early retirement for everyone, not just hype, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm here and I put out a cornucopia of content that is designed really to help normal people like you and I understand what this thing about retirement really is. It's not a fire channel. It's not a coast retired channel. It's just, I'm Sabado, this early retired cat that's lacing you up with game based on how real things happen. If you leave a comment, I respond to all comments. And if you want to have a chat with Sabado, send me an email. My email can be found in the channel description. We set up a time and we have a conversation. It's that simple. And what you see here is what you get there, except you get more detailed information, because it's never about me. It's all about you, and wanting to make sure that people that may not have had the opportunity to have these conversations, are able to have those conversations now with somebody who's actually been there, done that in a real way that's not trying to sell you something. The reality is freedom isn't about having the most. It's about building a life that needs less. But also recognize that it's never my expectation that everybody retire early, but it is my expectation that you live your best life. So on that note, I'm going to cut it off here, but have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.